Chapter 5. When the meal finished, the waiters cleared the dirty dishes and the philharmonics gathered in front of the royal table. As the help returned to the kitchen, the prince stood and the room went silent. He held his arms to his side. "Welcome to the castle of Wyvernon, the home of the king, my father and his fathers before him. As you all know, my father has passed into the heavens to sit alongside his father. It is with heavy heart that we acknowledge the loss his death brings to the kingdom of Wyvernon." The prince paused and looked to the ceiling. The royal adviser, seated at his right side, placed his hand on the prince's arm. The prince leveled his head and continued, "But this is not the time for sorrow, rather celebration. Let us lift our heads, allow the tears to disappear, and dance into the night, allowing the music to move us and our hearts to share in the delightful occasion." The prince peered down at the philharmonics and nodded. The conductor connected eyes with each of the players and lifted his arms, slightly raising them before letting them drop a few inches. With the drop, the philharmonic members began to play their instruments. The music was soothing, but evoked a somber mood, as if it were a lamentation for the fallen king. The prince and his party, which was composed of his advisers and top knights, descended the stairs to the ballroom floor. Nina was first to stand, not questioning her decision, her confidence causing some of the other ladies to feel intimidated. As more of the guests stood, Hannah decided she should follow suit. Her stomach was quite full from the feast. The fullness combined with nerves made her feel nauseous. The first dance was meant to be done by oneself, meaning no need for partners. Many of the girls formed groups with their friends on the dance floor. The ones with higher confidence danced near the center with the prince and his party, but many remained far away, whether out of nerves or embarrassment for their solo dancing skills. "I'm going in," Nina stated, before heading straight toward the center of the floor. Hannah watched longingly after her. She was alone, and there was no way she was about to dance near the prince. Hannah glanced around the room, and she noticed at least half of the girls were floating near their seats from dinner, not having yet decided what to do, much like herself. Hannah found a group near her, composed of ladies she was familiar with, for they sometimes stopped in the shop when she worked. Hannah forced a smile, and they welcomed her. Continuing to gaze near the center, Hannah caught a glimpse of Nina, who wore an exaggerated laughing expression. Not far from Nina, Hannah spotted the prince, who appeared to be having a grand time himself. Some of the girls who had been previously floating on the outer boundary of the dance floor left, understanding their odds of becoming queen were slim when so many women were willing to dance near the prince. A few minutes into dancing, Hannah closed her eyes and cleared her mind. The nerves slowly faded away as her stomach settled, though her heart continued to race from dancing. It was no longer about the prince in her mind. She didn't have to impress him, not from where she stood. For now, it was simply about having a good time, allowing herself a good time, with the ladies of the kingdom she did not often get to talk to. After the fourth song ended, they cleared the center of the dance floor. Hannah, who stood far from the center, attempted to peek her head over the other ladies. She felt a pull on her arm and turned to see Nina, whose hair was slightly disheveled. Her breathing was heavy. "You're never going to believe it," Nina yelled over the crowd. "I talked to the prince!" "Wow, sounds amazing," Hannah enthusiastically responded. The music began and a loud, disappointed sigh issued from many of the ladies. The tune was familiar to Hannah, and then she remembered why. Her father had taught her this dance after learning it on a trade mission. He told her one day she may need to know it. Granted, at the time she didn't believe him, but at this moment, she was one of the few guests who knew the song and dance. Nina appeared upset. "Ugh, the dance of the enchantress. I don't know this one." Hannah looked at her in shock. The girl who seemed perfect in her eyes didn't know something she did. It gave her a boost of self-esteem, though she'd never admit to it. "I know this one," Hannah said with a radiant smile. "Then what are you waiting for? Go dance with the prince," Nina urged. Hannah nodded and headed toward the center. It appeared someone had already paired with the prince. No worries, because partners switched during the song. Hannah found a man without a partner. He bowed and she curtsied. With a shared smile, they stood in position, waiting for the remainder of the men to pair. As the last came together, the music began at the start, signifying the beginning of the dance. The partners got into position. Hannah's nerves returned to her. Her heart pounded. She almost felt as if her partner could hear it. She swallowed and attempted to look into the knight's eyes, understanding eye contact was meant to be kept while dancing. But that only made her more anxious. She felt embarrassed, for her palms began to sweat. The knight, realizing her nervousness from trying to maintain eye contact, sympathetically grinned and moved his eyes to look past her rather than at her. She shared a smile of appreciation for his chivalrous gesture. Hannah glanced at the other women and realized some of them didn't even know the dance. They simply wanted a chance to get closer to the prince. However, even Nina recognized the stupidity of doing this. Nothing was to be gained from embarrassing oneself in front of the prince. Rather, the royal advisor stepped in, asking the one or two who had no clue to leave the castle for disrespecting the prince with their careless actions. They appeared stunned that such a drastic measure was taken against them, but realized causing a scene would only lead to further shame. As the partners switched, the extra men bowed out of the dance. Hannah was once again dancing with the knight. She felt herself growing accustomed to dancing in front of a crowd. Her breathing returned to normal, and she started to enjoy herself once more. The knight and Hannah exchanged a smile. She found keeping eye contact was not as hard when focusing the mind elsewhere, focusing on the next move being the prime distraction. Hannah counted the people in front of her. 2 more switches, and she would get the opportunity to dance with the prince. By then, she should have no problem, she figured. The music gave the cue for another switch. Hannah found herself growing excited. As she spun to her next partner, she glanced at the prince. She was so close. They positioned themselves and began the dance once more. This man had golden hair and a glittering smile. His presence was friendly. However, she noticed a strange feeling on the hand that held her own. Her smile quickly dropped. Saliva built up in her mouth as swallowing became difficult. She turned her eyes to the ground in disbelief and bit her lip. A silent prayer formed in her head as she continued to feel his amber eyes gaze at her. On his hand was a ring, a red gem laid in it. Her nerves returned in full force. She wanted to scream for help, but an overwhelming feeling of terror entered her. If she made a scene or revealed his identity, he may hurt everyone within the banquet hall, and he had no reason to do so at the moment, as far as she knew. So Hannah forced a silence upon herself, hoping the partner switch would occur soon. In his attire, he blended in perfectly among the prince and his royal court. It wasn't until now that she realized he hadn't attended the dinner, unless he watched from afar. How had he managed to sneak into the castle undetected, she wondered. Hannah slowly opened her eyes and examined his face, attempting to convince herself it was not the man in the ruby cloak, the sorcerer. "You are here to kill me, aren't you?" Hannah asked. Her eyes could not stay connected with his for longer than a second. Rather, she stared at his ring when she could not look at his face. The man smiled. "Why would you say that?" His deep, comforting voice affirmed her thoughts. It was him. No trying to deny that now. The music continued to play, but Hannah tuned out the environment. All had gone silent in her head. His and her words were all she could process, as if they were the only two there, and yet she continued to dance. "Isn't that what your kind do? Kill those who see them in practice?" He giggled, but she continued. "But then why did you save me earlier? If you wanted me dead, doesn't that seem counterproductive?" "So I was right. I thought it was you," the ruby sorcerer responded. His smile never wavered, nor did his voice cease to change inflection. His tone was soothing, as if he realized Hannah's fear and attempted to calm her, whether for her sake or his own. "Let's just dance." Hannah closed her eyes and stumbled a little. She was unsure if everyone watching could see her entire body shake, for she felt the nerves coursing through her. "Ease up," he calmly instructed. Though structured like a command, the bass in his voice and the calming tones made it sound more like a lyric. Hannah took a deep breath and returned to reality. She focused on the music and her footsteps, ensuring no further slip-ups in the dance. Her eyes moved up to meet his. He flashed a smile at her. "There you go." Hannah looked past him. wondering if Nina could see the encounter. It was no dream. The sights and sounds ensured this. When it came time for the switch, Hannah moved on, but found herself looking back at him. As she turned to face her new partner, she realized it was the prince. Though a slight pit fell into her stomach, her state of terror had ended. They took up their positions and began to dance. The prince was ever more favorable to the eye up close. Nina's excitement was not without reason. "I don't believe we've met," the prince said. His eyes focused on her eyes, and though still having a problem with eye contact, Hannah forced herself to stay connected out of respect. However, it did result in her nerves rising. "I'm Hannah Baker. My family owns bread and biscuit bakery in the market district," Hannah replied. Thankfully, the prince was easy to talk to. His gentle touch comforted her, his energy tranquil, no doubt naturally charismatic, a good quality for a king. "Ah, yes," the prince said. "My father quite enjoyed the berry pastries the older gentleman there would whip up. I believe he even attended the funeral of the man." "Yes, that would be my grandfather," Hannah responded. Her nerves calmed the more they talked. The prince continued to ask about the bakery and her family. Though he didn't mention it, he was quite impressed with her ability to dance and answer his questions, not to mention her calm composure around him. She was not dressed as decadently as some of the other ladies, but her simplicity was refreshing. When the dance ended, he bowed and she curtsied, both expressing wide smiles. Hannah turned from the prince to head back toward Nina, a permanent smile worn on her face. She had to fight her way through the crowd, many of the girls rushing to dance next to the prince due to their missed opportunity with the partner dance. Nina was waiting by their seats and squealed when Hannah came into her vision. She ran at her best friend and wrapped her arms around Hannah, jumping up and down as she did so. "You got to dance with the prince! How was it?" Nina asked. Some of the other ladies nearby were listening in, hoping to learn about the prince from her experience. "It was amazing, like a dream." Hannah looked back in his direction, but couldn't see him past the flood of ladies, but she knew he was there, causing her to smile. "Just like a dream,"